Well, the difficulty was finding premises to make the recordings, because I realized using other independent studios were very expensive. And in the end, I found this building in Holloway Road, which gave me 3 floors. The ground floor is occupied by a leather goods shop. And well, I decided this was the place for me. So I moved the small amount of gear that I had in and talked to Major Banks and described the sort of things I wanted. And ended up with the equipment that I'm using today. I'll describe first of all the studio itself. It's on the 3rd floor, and it's the size of an average bedroom, no larger. I've covered the walls with acoustic tiles, all the walls except one, which is covered with a thick curtain. This has very good absorbing power, and the studio is extremely damp. The floor is carpeted, and the ceiling is completely covered in tiles. And only the one wall has a few tiles missing, and this gives me a certain amount of brightness. And but basically, it's completely dead. I have no playback speaker in the studio, and no cue lights. I have a piano, which I've put drawing pins in the pads, and it produces a more metallic sound, which is much better to record, and is much more suitable for pop records. The microphones, the cables lead straight down into my control room, which is about the size of a small bedroom. Right, actually was used as a small bedroom, I should imagine. And in this control room, I have a sort of desk with the equipment piled on it, and I have a table and I have a rack. But let's go back to the studio, and I'll describe the microphones. The main microphones are 2 U47s. I think this is a wonderful microphone, and I use it for all my vocalists. It has a very good characteristic for close work, that is for a vocalist and instruments that you need a lot of presence on. And to help this, I use a small piece of foam plastic on the front. This stops pops and bangs when a vocalist working close to it. I did have a stereo condenser microphone, the SM2, but this has broken down on me. I believe it has a habit of doing this. First the one side went, then the other, and to be quite truthful, I haven't mended it recently because it didn't really stand out any more than the microphones I'm using. The others are AKG mics, the small microphones, dynamic types that are very popular today. I have about 6 of those. I have also a couple of Reslows. I use one on the bass drum and one sometimes for a vocal group, working on both sides of it. Really, the microphones aren't all that expensive, but they're very efficient, and being such a small studio, they're used pretty close to the instruments. And later in the other control room, I add echo to different channels, and this way I get what I feel is a more commercial sound than to get the instruments to balance themselves in the studio. Anyway, we go into the control room now, and the main recorder machine is a Lyric, twin track Lyric. I usually record the voice on one track and the backing on the other. The other recorder is a TR-51, and this I use for dubbing, and I must say it's turned out to be a marvelous little machine that I would prefer to change it soon for something like an Ampex, which would possibly be a little more reliable. This machine tends to pop just a little bit. Sometimes you get sort of bumping in the background. I think it's to do with the bias. The mixers, there's a varied selection. I have a homemade mixer which has got 4 channels with top lift on each. Then I use a Vortexan mixer, which is a pretty good solid job, and the sort of thing that you leave and sort of forget, but it has been very useful for me. And then I use a Vortexian tape recorder for delaying the echo. This gives me tape delay echo, which I use. Then above my control room I have a room which I've made into an echo chamber, and it's quite remarkable for the size of it. It really gives me a very, very good echo sound, which is on all my records. And also I use electronic echo, which I have a patent on. It's my own invention, and this is used quite a lot on my records too, especially on guitars and percussive sounds. The vocal mic goes through a little cooker I've made, which has got bass, top and middle lift in it. It was originally a small amplifier. It has 3 channels, so I can mix in a vocal group with it and possibly the frontline instruments. And this is on top of the Lyric, one of the amplifiers, and it's quite handy. I can mix without having to walk about the control room too much. The speaker is a tenor dual concentric in a Lockwood cabinet. That's how they use at most studios today. I also have the same type of speaker downstairs, so I can play my acetates and records through, make sure they're cut properly and with the standards well up. I've also got in my control room for the second channel, the vocal channel, I have another tenor speaker cabinet, the smaller type that fits into a corner. I don't know the model, but this I find rather metallic, and I only use at low levels. I can't really balance on it. I've tried, but I just can't seem to get a balance on it. See, it seems to have an artificial top lift that rather misleads you. Well, I service my own gear. I have an advanced oscillator and a small oscilloscope, the type you can pick up for £15. The oscillator is very important. I quite often use it on sound effects on some of my records. I have some bits of gear that you don't usually find with the keen recordist. And that is an old BBC limiter, which I use on the voice track quite often. It is very ancient. It's got the old large pin, large bass type valves. It must be at least 30 years old. That is very efficient and isn't all that noticeable in its operation. Then I have a compressor which I built myself. I found the design in one of the magazines, and it works very, very efficiently. I'm very pleased with it. I have also, for the electric bass, I feed this through an equalizer unit, and on this unit I've experimented, and I feed the output back. I believe it's positive feedback, but when carefully done and through a choke, it gives you the effect of the string being plucked. You get sort of a metallic pluck of the string itself, when this is quite effective on recordings. I don't always use it, but on the Outlaws records, for instance, I use it. Well, I think that describes pretty accurately the equipment. Oh, by the way, I feed my output to the speakers through quad amplifiers. They're a wonderful amplifier. I also use a quad downstairs for playing my records.